Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader. Today I will be reading Two Very Rare Bears by S.P. Bullock and G.S. Worth. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the authors for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I have included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are those that do and those that don't. Christine Kemp. In memory of Marie. For Thomas Scottford. Gone but not forgotten. Chapter 1. Churchill's is London's biggest and grandest department store. It is also one of the oldest, first opening its doors in 1887. Visitors flock from all over the world, enchanted by its spectacular design. It is 12 stories high to represent the 12 months of the year, with 4 giant turrets on the roof to represent the 4 seasons. And it has 365 windows, one for each day of the year. At the time it was built, it was one of the tallest buildings in the world. Churchill's prides itself on every item sold. It is especially famous for its toy department. Children and adults alike love the vast array of toys that are sold all year round. But during the build up to Christmas, excitement reaches fever pitch, with customers eager to buy Churchill's famous Christmas goods. This year's festive theme is English royalty, and items have already been selling like hotcakes on pre-orders. One item which always sells in great numbers is the Churchill's famous doggy bear. Sir Austin Churchill, the store's founder, had personally designed the doggy bear for his beloved wife, Catherine, who had suffered from terrible allergies. She desperately wanted a dog, but she found it impossible to own one. Her face swelled, her eyes bulged, and she itched all over in the company of dogs, and for that matter, anything with fur. So, Sir Austin commissioned a delightful little teddy bear to be made in the style of a dog for his beloved wife. And more than 100 years later, it is still one of Churchill's most desirable, iconic, and popular toys. This year, all the doggy bears are to be named after royalty, past and present. The factory that manufactures most of Churchill's soft toys is based in Shanghai, China, and called the Jade Emperor Toy Company. Churchill's had used them for years because their attention to detail is second to none. At the factory, workers were now preparing the order of 5,000 hand-stitched doggy bears. One of the company's most trusted employees was a lady called Ling Wei. She had worked there for many years, carefully sewing all the bears together in a way few could match. She loved her job and always thought of the joy the bears she stitched together brought to children and adults alike, many miles away. She had not had children of her own, but she had one day hoped to. On her wrist she wore a rose quartz bracelet her mother had given her, in the hope it would bring her the children she wished for. She believed its healing properties and energy would bless her with little ones, but she had worn the bracelet for many years in vain. Today, just like any other day, she had stitched the doggy bears, daydreaming as always. Ling Wei had decided to do some overtime as money was tight at home since her father had become ill. It was late, she yawned and rubbed her eyes. It was time to go home for some sleep. But as she got up from her workstation, she accidentally caught her precious bracelet on the edge of her sewing machine, and it snapped. She was so tired, all she could do was watch as the little stones rolled across the table and bounced across the factory floor. "Oh no!" she cried, as she saw them pinging and bouncing in different directions. Quickly, she scrambled to the floor and began to gather the stones as best she could. Tears ran down her cheeks as she filled her pocket with the stones and thought of the children she longed for. Weary, she sat back on her chair, she wiped her eyes, and stared at the two little doggy bears on the table in front of her. She read the names sewn neatly on their left feet. Harry was one little bear, and George was the other. She smiled at their sweet little faces. "It's been a long day," she said, looking at Harry and George as she rolled a couple of rose quartz stones between her fingers. Then a strange feeling came over her. Maybe she would never have the children she longed for, but these two little bears who sat in front of her seemed a little different from all the other bears. Quietly, she took two rose quartz stones from her pocket, and into each of the little bears' chests she secretly sewed a stone right where a little heart should be. She smiled to herself and each little bear. "There you go, Harry and George. You now have a heart and will always love and be loved as you carry the power of the rose quartz crystal inside you," she said. Ling Wei felt a lightness in herself, for each bear represented to her the child she had longed for and never had. Now she would set them free into the world, like a good luck charm or talisman for whoever was to own them, hoping they would bring good fortune, love, and peace wherever they went. And with that she placed the two small doggy bears with their crystal hearts in the packing area with the other bears, ready for Churchill's Christmas order. Chapter 2. A few days later, back in London, Mr. Cuthbert Kane, Churchill's purchasing manager, knew demand for this year's Christmas doggy bears, the royalty collection, would be huge. He had placed the order with the Jade Emperor Toy Company and was hoping that it would leave on schedule so that the bears would arrive in time for Christmas. They would be departing by boat, and he knew it would take up to 7 weeks for the ship to sail from China to England. The boat that was to make the voyage was called the Wangshu, a gigantic cargo ship that could hold more containers than any other ship in China. Its captain, Mr. Wang Shu Ying, meaning elegant and brave, had been looking forward to the voyage. Along with its cargo of cars, motorcycles, TVs, and computers, there was to be a container of 5,000 doggy bears bound for Churchill's. The captain had checked the weather and saw that there was a bad storm heading for the South China Sea. He had asked if they could delay their departure, but the shipping company insisted on the ship setting sail, assuring him that the storm wouldn't be anything that gigantic ship couldn't handle. The toy company container was one of the last to be loaded on the Wangshu. When all the checks had been completed, the giant ship set sail. The captain was nervous, as he knew the storm was not going to be a pleasant experience. The rain started falling as soon as the ship left the docks, and continued to rain, getting heavier by the minute. The storm, as the captain had feared, was getting stronger, and 7 hours into the journey, the waves got bigger and bigger. The Wangshu swayed from side to side. Although the captain's name, Wang Shuying, meant elegant and brave, He didn't feel very elegant or brave now as he had no control over the ocean or the storm. Lightning and thunder came crashing down, lighting up the huge sky. How he wished they had set sail when the storm had passed! But now he and his crew were at the mercy of the sea. The lightning bolts that the crew had seen from the deck of the ship now started to hit the Wang's shoe. "This isn't good," thought the captain. "Should we turn back?" But it was pointless, as even if they did turn back, the storm was all around them. They had no choice but to carry on. Just then a gigantic bolt of lightning struck the rear of the ship, hitting the Churchill's container so hard that the rear door flew open. It was swinging wildly from side to side, and before the crew had a chance to get to the container and close the door, one of the crates containing half of Churchill's order of doggy bears slid backwards out of the container and smashed into the side of the ship and toppled overboard into the raging sea below. 2,500 doggy bears sank into the dark, swirling ocean. The crew knew they had no chance of retrieving them, and they had to sail on. A few men managed to close the door of the Churchill's container, and said they would check on the rest of the cargo when the storm had passed. It was a good job they hadn't done so immediately, for at the rear of the container, where the rest of the bears were neatly packed, was a very strange sight indeed. There was a warm pink glow, and the glow was coming from two little doggy bears, which had somehow fallen out of the crate and were lying on the floor. The warm pink glow was coming from their chests, getting stronger and stronger until it illuminated the whole container. Suddenly the little bears started to move. First their arms, then their legs. Then they stood up on their own. How could this be? The little doggy bears stood staring at each other. The pink glow was shining from their chests. Then one of the bears started to utter words in perfect English. "Where are we, and how did we get here?" questioned the little bear. Still staring at each other, the other bear started speaking, but not in English, but in perfect Mandarin. The English-speaking doggy bear couldn't understand what the Chinese doggy bear was saying, and vice versa. They both felt shocked, as they didn't know who they were, where they were, or why there was a pink glow emitting from their chests. They both felt the swaying of the ship and could hear the swirling wind outside. They sat on the floor of the container and could see that they had names stitched into their left feet. "George," said the little English-speaking bear. "Your name is George," he said, pointing to George's left foot. Sure enough, the name George was stitched onto his left foot. George pointed at the other bear's left foot. He looked down and could see on the sole of his foot was sewn the name Harry. "I think that must be my name," said the little bear. So now, at least now, they knew their names. Harry and George. What they didn't know was that the lightning bolt which had hit the Churchill's container was so strong that it had sent a bolt of energy so powerful that it had charged the rose quartz crystals that Ling Wei had lovingly sewn into their chests. This reaction had somehow combined the magical powers of the crystal and given the little bear's life. Ling Wei's dream was now a reality because, unbeknownst to her, Harry's and George's little bears were beating in the middle of the South China Sea. The bears clung to each other. Their bewilderment turned to fear as the soft pink glow that was illuminating their chests suddenly started to fade. They held on to each other as they were plunged into darkness. It was now pitch black inside the container. There was nothing they could do except wait. They huddled together, and all they could hear was the groaning and creaking of the huge ship as it batted its way through the treacherous swirling sea. They eventually drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the adventure that lay ahead of them. Stay tuned for chapter 3 and 4. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book.